The New York Times filed a motion on Friday to dismiss a federal defamation lawsuit filed by actor Justin Baldoni in response.
Could the judge be prejudiced because of his brother's affiliation?
Filed Friday night, which is always how you file things when you don't want the media to report on them.
But the drama surrounding it is far from over. From the heated back and forth between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni to a high-stakes multi-million-dollar lawsuit, the controversy just won't die down. The PR battle rages on, and now the New York Times has jumped into the fray, making headlines after getting caught in the middle of this unfolding saga.
He's alleging that the newspaper defamed him and engaged in other shady behavior.
Not only is Lively doubling down on her accusations against Baldoni, but the Times is now officially fighting to get out of his $250 million lawsuit.
New York Times asked court to dismiss Justin Baldoni's defamation lawsuit.
They've just filed a motion to dismiss, arguing they had no involvement in Lively's agenda and were simply doing their job as journalists. Sounds interesting, right? To back up their case, they even referenced a few statutory laws for good measure.
In the new filing, attorneys for the Times claim that the paper is protected by fair report privilege. Now, that's something that safeguards outlets from libel when reporting on official documents like legal filings.
But here's where things get really interesting. Baldoni's team claims to have receipts proving that the Times had access to Lively's civil complaint days before publishing their article. In fact, they allegedly knew all about it long before. Baldoni even had a clue. So the big question is, was the Times simply reporting the news, or were they actively working with Lively to take Baldoni down?
The article from the Times included all of these text messages and communications, which his team claims were heavily edited. And they were.
The Times article included a series of text messages and communications, but Baldoni's team insists they were heavily edited. And they were. But this isn't just about one article. The Times didn't just report on the lawsuit, they turned it into a full-blown media spectacle. Baldoni claims the paper deliberately pushed a one-sided hit piece, painting him as guilty before he even had a chance to defend himself. So, what's really going on here? Was Baldoni set up by Hollywood's most powerful PR machine backing Lively? Or is he overreaching with his $250 million lawsuit against the media giant? Well, that all depends on which side of this drama you believe.
That New York Times sent to Justin back in December, days before Christmas, with a short one-day window for him to respond.
It's official. The New York Times is looking for a way out, and fast. Weeks after Baldoni hit them with a costly defamation lawsuit, the paper has finally made its way to court, pushing for a dismissal. Their argument? They were just doing their job when they reported on Blake Lively's civil rights complaint. Nothing more, nothing less. According to the Times, there's no secret agenda or smear campaign at play here. Just journalists doing what they do best, informing the public.
This case should never have been brought against the New York Times. Blake Lively raised serious concerns about the way she was treated on the set and after the movie's release. We did exactly what news organizations should do. We informed the public of the complaint she filed with the California Civil Rights Department.
It's official. The New York Times is looking for a way out, and fast. Weeks after Baldoni hit them with a costly defamation lawsuit, the paper has finally made its way to court, pushing for a dismissal. Their argument? They were just doing their job when they reported on Blake Lively's civil rights complaint. Nothing more, nothing less. According to the Times, there's no secret agenda or smear campaign at play here. Just journalists doing what they do best, informing the public.
Mr. Baldoni's misbegotten campaign against the Times, questioning our ethics, attempting to discredit our reporting, filing a baseless lawsuit will not silence us. Now look.
The first question that comes to mind is, how could a major media corporation approve an article that could ruin careers based solely on the claims of the alleged victim? Is that really what journalism has come to? No wonder so many people are turning away from legacy media. In their motion to dismiss, a Times spokesperson dismissed Baldoni's lawsuit as a shameless PR document and accused him of running a misguided campaign to discredit their work. Essentially, they're saying, Baldoni is using this lawsuit as a weapon to silence them and spin the narrative in his favor.
Answers that Justin has to the questions by Blake Lively, answers that were not included in this initial article. And of course,
Mr. Baldoni's misguided campaign against the Times, questioning our ethics, discrediting our reporting, and filing a baseless lawsuit will not silence us. Now, think about what that really means. They're painting Baldoni as the one with an agenda while claiming they're just innocent reporters caught in the crossfire of his battle with Lively. How convenient. Integrity is one of the most important values in journalism. But if you've read the article they published right before Blake filed her lawsuit in New York, you have to wonder, how does the journalist who wrote it sleep at night, knowing they may have just ruined someone's career?
Right, because Blake Lively's dominated the media. What they did was they worked with the New York Times. Her publicist worked directly with the New York Times. They shared illegally obtained text messages.
Obviously, Baldoni didn't just wake up one day and randomly decide to amend his lawsuit. Every move he's made so far has been calculated, and this suit against the Times is no different. According to court documents, Baldoni isn't just claiming he got bad press. He sees it as a setup. He believes the article was a key part of Blake's bigger plan to take him down in one swift and devastating move.
They concocted a complaint that they filed with the Civil Rights Division. They omitted texts that would have provided context, texts that were in the exact same string that would have provided context of what was really going on.
Honestly, this could have been an easy win for Lively, and she would have walked away smiling. But Baldoni understood early on that in a battle like this, receipts are everything. There was no way he would accuse the New York Times of bias without solid proof. Thanks to investigative journalists like Candace Owens, hidden details came to light. It turns out the Times had access to Lively's complaint a full 11 days before they even published.
Emojis.
And in fact, they actually removed emojis from texts that show that there was satire and there was joking around by the PR crisis agents. I mean,
let that sink in for a moment. It's almost unbelievable how careless the New York Times was with their metadata. They likely left a trail of their actions, never expecting anyone to dig deep enough to find it, especially not Baldoni. But they were dead wrong. Let's be real. 11 days is a lifetime in the media. That's plenty of time to make calls, strategize, and shape the narrative long before it reaches the public. But here's where it gets even weirder. It wasn't just text messages that were taken out of context in the so-called receipts used in the article. The legacy media even went as far as scrubbing off emojis. Yes, emojis.
Initial lawsuit, it included the full communications, most glaringly between his publicist and his crisis PR expert, where they were joking about some of the bad press that Delulu Lively was getting, but they also said, well, I didn't plant that. I can't take credit for that. That wasn't me.
The PR crisis agent was brought in because actually Blake Lively's publicist, Leslie Sloan, was planting stories negative to Justin.
Well,
do you realize how wild it is to remove emojis from chats just to make the messages fit a different narrative? That's some next-level scheming. But here's the funny part. The New York Times spokesperson couldn't stop insisting that everything was done by the book. She made a whole spectacle out of it. According to her statement, the journalist assigned to the Baldoni piece conducted all the right investigations and verified both the legitimacy of the receipts and Blake's allegations.
Mr. Baldoni, we are reporting about a crisis communication operation conducted on behalf of you, Jamie Heath and Wayfarer Studios, to protect your reputations and harm Blake Lively's, as described in a legal complaint filed today.
To be honest, this is some seriously shady stuff unfolding in real time. Legacy media has been under fire for years, especially for controlling the narrative and deciding what the public should believe. At this point, it's hard to deny that they do exactly that, and maybe even more. If this was truly honest journalism like they claim, then why didn't the Times reach out to Baldoni before publishing the story? Why did they frame him as guilty from the start instead of presenting both sides fairly.
Like they're trying to make this look like they didn't have the information ahead of time, which we damn well know the metadata shows they were working on this, back in October.
Well, it turns out the Times did reach out to Baldoni, just as they were obligated to. But they pulled a sneaky move that's almost unbelievable. They made sure the email reached him at a time when he had no way to stop the article from being published. Crazy, right? For a little more context, remember this article dropped during the holidays, meaning they sent the notice when they knew it would be nearly impossible for him to put together a proper response. He would have needed to consult his lawyers before making any move. Dave Neal, a sharp voice in this unfolding drama, broke down the email to Baldoni perfectly. Now, take a moment to really think about this. The email was sent to Baldoni on December 20th around 9 p.m., just 5 days before Christmas and right at the start of the holiday weekend. Do you honestly believe that was just a coincidence? That there was nothing suspicious about the timing? But it wasn't just the timing that raised eyebrows. If you pay close attention, you'll notice they were carefully wording that email to avoid admitting they already knew about Lively's civil complaint before Baldoni did. It's almost as if they were trying to cover up the fact that they had this information well in advance. And we know, thanks to the metadata, that the Times had been working on this story as far back as October. Now imagine if Candace Owens hadn't exposed that metadata, showing the Times was fully aware of Blake's plan to file that complaint long before it went public. At this point, it's not a stretch to believe they also knew she was planning to file a lawsuit right after. The article had done its damage. The effort to control this narrative started last summer, when there was growing concern that Lively's complaints about the filming of It Ends With Us might leak during the movie's rollout. As Dave Neal pointed out, why on earth would Baldoni sabotage a film he spent 5 years of his life working on just because of Blake's accusations? Let's not forget, he wasn't just emotionally invested in the movie, he was financially tied to it as well. Sony may have handled marketing, but they didn't fund everything. Baldoni and his company, Wayfarer, poured massive resources into the film. So, the idea that he deliberately orchestrated a smear campaign, that's not just unlikely, it's a complete lose-lose situation for him. If Baldoni had tried to shut down Lively's claims too soon, he would have been torn apart, but he didn't even flinch. That's a tough spot for anyone, which makes you wonder, what exactly was the Times trying to imply in that email? Baldoni had absolutely no reason to leak Lively's harassment allegations. None at all. Sure, he could have challenged her. Claims to defend his reputation, but from a business standpoint, that move would have made no sense. There was too much money at stake. And honestly, I can't argue with that. Yet, the Times insists that despite Wayfarer's hundreds of pages of screenshots, outrage, and accusations, this case is very simple. According to them, the article is fully protected under fair reporting, making Wayfarer's defamation claims baseless. But let's be real. The only person who stood to gain from leaking those harassment allegations was Blake Lively. Either way, she won. If the movie flopped because of the controversy, she wouldn't have lost sleep over it. Now, here's the million-dollar question. How exactly did Lively obtain approval for this so-called subpoena that gave her access to these text messages? Who did she subpoena specifically? While we wait for those answers, there are still a few questions the New York Times needs to answer. If they truly reviewed all those text messages, why did they only publish select parts? Why not release the full exchange? Because without carefully edited messages, there wouldn't be a scandalous headline. Simple as that. Oh, so they reviewed the texts? Did they also review the conveniently missing emojis? Baldoni's legal team isn't backing down, making it loud and clear that this fight is far from over. This wasn't just reporting, it was coordination. According to Baldoni's side, the Times and Lively's camp weren't just aligned, they were actively working together to shape the story before it ever went public. And honestly, it's getting harder to argue that this wasn't a calculated hit piece. What most people don't realize is how much influence Blake Lively has over the media. If you didn't know already, Hollywood's PR machines are no joke. A-list celebrities like Lively and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, have access to the most powerful PR teams in the industry. That's probably why they believed this situation wouldn't spiral into a full-blown scandal. But, unfortunately for them, it did. If a media giant like the New York Times is taking sides before the public even knows there's a conflict, it means someone is pulling the strings. No question about it. Apparently, the Times reviewed over 1,000 pages of text messages. If they truly did, they would have seen the full picture. It's one thing to have evidence, but proving it beyond a reasonable doubt, especially against an institution as powerful as the New York Times, is an entirely different challenge. If Baldoni manages to do that in court, this scandal will explode to a whole new level. It will set a massive precedent for years to come. Because if one of the world's most respected newspapers was secretly working with a Hollywood star to take someone down, what does that say about everything else they report? Baldoni never set out to attack Lively. He wanted to protect the film, protect himself, and even protect her from making false allegations that could ruin lives. But at this point, he's not just fighting for his own name. He's exposing how the industry truly operates. It's a bold move, no doubt, but he's proving he's ready for battle. And the Times better be prepared. Now, let's talk about timing. They sent out that notification email at 9:43 p.m. on a Friday, right before the holidays, and they had the audacity to demand a response in less than 24 hours. Sending an email about a career-destroying article at a time when they knew Baldoni wouldn't be able to react? That's not just unfair, it's outright ruthless. And yet, they want us to believe this wasn't collusion. The craziest part is that the New York Times had allegedly been working on this article since October. That's 2 full months of preparation, yet they only notified Baldoni less than 24 hours before publishing it. It's completely indefensible. Just imagine, if you miss a single email on a Friday night while spending time with your family, you wake up the next morning to find your name being dragged through the mud. That's exactly what happened here. Meanwhile, while the New York Times was busy painting Baldoni as Hollywood's ultimate villain, another major outlet, the Los Angeles Times, actually did what real journalists are supposed to do. They investigated. And guess what? The reality at Wayfarer Studios was nothing like what the Times had tried to sell. Unlike most media outlets covering this controversy, the LA Times didn't rely on anonymous insiders or sources close to the matter. They went straight to the people who actually worked at Wayfarer. Now, based on the New York Times version of events, you'd expect these employees to have horror stories, right? Wrong. Not a single one accused Baldoni of harassment, misconduct, or anything remotely close to what Lively and the Times had implied. And the most shocking accusation? Brace yourself. Toxic positivity. Yes, you heard that right. Some former employees actually complained that Baldoni was too positive, too uplifting, too motivational, and too happy all the time. Let that sink in. Make this stuff up. Toxic positivity? Seriously? Imagine the headline. Man smiles too much. Career ruined. The New York Times and Blake Lively wouldn't like that very much, would they? Honestly, this is the first time I've ever heard the phrase toxic positivity. What about you? It's pretty wild that people see constant positive energy as something suspicious. But here's the best part. Wayfarer Studios actually responded to the LA Times article, and their reply was hilarious. They didn't deny the claims. In fact, they owned it. They basically said, yeah, we have a positive work environment, and we're not changing that for anyone. Their official statement read, there have never been any reported complaints regarding workplace culture or any communicated issues about the platforms of its founders. Wayfarer believes that joy and positivity are the essence of good work, and they stand by this statement. At a time when actual Hollywood figures are being exposed for serious misconduct, Baldoni's biggest crime, according to former employees, is that he wanted a workplace that was uplifting and inspiring. Make it make sense. But here's the real kicker. If the LA Times could uncover this with a bit of actual journalism, why didn't the New York Times do the same? Why did they choose the most sensational, one-sided version of events? Why didn't they interview real employees or do any serious fact-checking before publishing an article that painted Baldoni as guilty from the start? Because if they had, they would have realized that there was no real scandal to begin with. And that would have completely destroyed the narrative, which, let's be honest, means it wouldn't have served Blake Lively's purpose. Take a closer look at the LA Times article. Who wrote it? Who influenced it? Where did it come from? Toxic positivity? Are you kidding me? If you think the LA Times ran this piece out of the goodness of their hearts, then you really don't understand how legacy media works. The headline alone tells you all you need to know. Either they published it for the clicks, or someone behind the scenes wanted this narrative out there, completely debunked with behind-the-scenes footage. Yet somehow, these allegations still made their way into the New York Times article. underestimating? The power of PR teams is a mistake, one you just can't afford to make. Either way, this lawsuit just got a whole lot messier. The Times might have thought they could bury this story, but Baldoni is making sure the truth comes out. And at this rate, the ones with the most to lose might not be Baldoni after all. And let's be real, positivity is a problem now. This article is beyond ridiculous. But just when you thought the accusations against him couldn't get any more absurd, here comes another so-called scandal. Apparently, Baldoni and his billionaire, business partner Steve Sarowitz, talked about their faith too much. Yes, you heard that right. That's the latest serious issue being thrown into the mix. According to one ex-employee, their discussions about faith made the workplace feel professionally inappropriate. Not coercive, not discriminatory, just uncomfortable. But here's the weird part. This so-called journalist, the one behind the hit piece, is actually highly revered in the journalism world. Which makes you wonder, why was she so biased? What's journalism without considering the full context of a story? In the email she sent Baldoni, she listed out the things he was accused of by Lively. And would you believe it if I told you that every single one of those accusations has been proven false by Baldoni's catalog of receipts? Take this claim, for example. Miss Lively brought complaints to you and Mr. Heath about alleged sexual and other inappropriate conduct. She claimed that you had improvised unwanted kissing with her and discussed your sex life, including encounters in which you may not have received consent. Now, let's not forget, Baldoni has already provided full details about this accusation. And guess what? The receipts don't lie. Blake was the one who insisted her character should be sexier. She was the one who rejected an intimacy coordinator for the sex scenes. Even the dance scene where she claimed she was harassed, it's been completely debunked with behind-the-scenes footage. So, tell me again, who's really controlling the narrative here and uplifting messages? They weren't forcing their beliefs on anyone. They were simply staying true to the values their company was built on. But let's get back to this so-called damning email. If you thought the previous accusations were bizarre, buckle up, because it gets even wilder. Lively claimed that Mr. Heath showed her a video of his wife naked and that he watched her in her trailer while she was topless getting body makeup. Removed, despite her asking him to look away. Now, let's take a moment to ask, what was this journalist thinking when they wrote this email? Because when Baldoni exposed the truth, the entire narrative fell apart. That video Lively mentioned, it wasn't what she described at all. It was actually a heartfelt clip of Mr. Heath's wife after giving birth in their home. A beautiful moment celebrating new life. And when Baldoni showed the world the actual footage, guess what? Not only was there zero nudity, but the video itself completely contradicted everything Lively had alleged. So, was this just another attempt to paint Baldoni and his team as something they're not? Because at this point, it's looking less like a legitimate complaint and more like an effort to twist reality. And here's where it gets even stranger. Why is Baldoni being criticized for being too positive and too spiritual? It almost feels like an attack on his personality rather than his actions. Like someone is trying to make him unlikable. But what's truly baffling is that actual employees, real people who worked at Wayfarer Studios, said Baldoni and Sarowitz's spirituality wasn't some weird, pushy agenda. It was simply a reflection of their company's core mission, to create films and TV shows with positive and uplifting messages. So, tell me again, where's the scandal? Crew members who were directly involved. Why not talk to them? Why rely solely on one side of the story? If Megan, the journalist behind this so-called investigative piece, actually cared about the truth, she would have done her due diligence. She would have given Baldoni enough time to respond to each and every claim. But nope, that wasn't the goal. The goal was to meet the bare minimum legal requirement of reaching out, which is why she sent that email less than 48 hours before publishing. And let's not forget the ridiculous water birth video allegation. Blake Lively wasn't just randomly shown those pictures and videos. She saw them because there was going to be a birth scene in the film. It was relevant to the movie. Yet, instead of acknowledging this very basic fact, the article twisted it into something completely different. But here's what's really crazy. After all the accusations, all the insinuations, and all the media spin, guess how many Wayfarer employees have accused Baldoni of actual workplace harassment? 0. Not a single one. So, if no one from his own company has made such claims, and if the allegations keep falling apart with actual proof, then you have to ask, what exactly did the Times stand to gain from trying to make Baldoni look bad? Because let's be real, if they had really wanted the truth, they would have gone into the field. They would have spoken to multiple Wayfarer employees. They would have reached out to producers, crew members, anyone who was actually there during filming. Instead, they took the easy route, the sensational one. And in doing so, legacy media has once again exposed itself for what it really is, an industry more interested in controversy than credibility. Work if the target stays silent. But Baldoni isn't staying silent. He's hitting back with receipts, and the more evidence his team uncovers, the worse it looks for the Times and Blake Lively's camp. At this point, it's impossible to ignore the fact that this wasn't just sloppy journalism, it was collusion. A coordinated effort to paint Baldoni as a villain before he even had the chance to defend himself. And the biggest flaw in their plan? No hard evidence. Every single time Baldoni's team exposes another lie, the opposing side scrambles to shift the narrative. First, it was harassment. When that didn't stick, it became toxic positivity and too much talk about faith. And now? They're even twisting something as innocent as a water birth video into some wild accusation. But here's the real question. If Megan, a seasoned journalist, had access to all this information, why didn't she dig deeper? Why didn't she push back on Lively's claims? If the accusations were that serious, wouldn't it be common sense to ask for proof? Instead, she let the narrative play out exactly as it was designed to. And if Baldoni is right that the Times had Lively's complaints at least 11 days in advance, giving them ample time to shape the story in her favor, then this is more than just bad reporting. It's character assassination, a deliberate attempt to ruin a man's reputation with zero credible evidence. But here's the thing about smear campaigns. They only work if people buy into them. And with every fact check, every receipt, and every exposed lie, the cracks in their story are only getting bigger. Wasn't satisfied with just taking control. She needed to rewrite history, framing Baldoni as the villain in order to justify her actions. But here's the thing. Her own words contradict the narrative she's trying to sell. She wanted her character to be sexier. She rejected an intimacy coordinator. And now, she's suddenly claiming she was made uncomfortable. The receipts don't lie, and neither does the convenient timing of this entire smear campaign. And let's not forget, the New York Times played a major role in amplifying these accusations. Now that their credibility is on the line, they're trying to distance themselves from the fallout, pretending they were just reporting the news. But if Baldoni wasn't prepared, if he didn't have hard evidence to counter these claims, this would have been career-ending. The real question, now? Will the court see through it? Will the judge recognize this for what it is? A coordinated attempt to destroy a man's reputation? Or will the Times' influence be enough to make this lawsuit disappear? One thing's for sure. If this case does move forward, things are about to get very messy for everyone involved. Rather than simply moving on, she wanted to ensure that he would never find success in Hollywood again. Instead of letting things go, she aimed to deliver the final blow, but she missed. As production progressed, she pushed for more control, applying to be a producer, obtaining the dailies, and making her own edits. She even sought a role in the editing process. Despite the fact that professionals had already been hired for the job, Lively could have taken the win and moved on to her next project. But now, that's unlikely to happen. No director in their right mind would want her involved in their production or post-production team. In fact, many will likely avoid casting her altogether. She overstepped her boundaries, taking control of the editing process and even making threats, refusing to promote the film unless she was in charge of marketing. If Baldoni's legal team succeeds in their lawsuit against the New York Times, it could lead to depositions, document disclosures, and behind-the-scenes emails coming to light. This would provide insight into how the Times built their story, how early they gained access to Lively's complaint, and whether they collaborated with her team to shape the narrative. However, it won't be an easy fight. Legacy media outlets, like the Times, will use every resource at their disposal to defend themselves. Throughout filming, Lively accused Baldoni and Heath of invading her privacy by entering her makeup trailer uninvited. She even claimed Baldoni walked in while she was breastfeeding, something that would undoubtedly be inappropriate. However, text message evidence provided by Baldoni contradicts this, showing that she had given him permission to enter. This scandal has escalated rapidly, and we're still only in March. Imagine what will unfold over the next 12 months leading up to the trial. One thing is certain. This will be a long, drawn-out battle. Now that it's clear that none of Wayfarer Studios' past or present employees have corroborated Lively's allegations, does her argument still hold up? From the beginning, she had concerns about the film. Before shooting even started, she objected to certain sex scenes, calling them gratuitous. Ultimately, with Sony's backing, she created her own version of the movie, bringing in her own editors and composer to finalize the cut. At this point, the best the Times can do is publish hit pieces focused on Baldoni's so-called toxic positivity and discussions about his faith. If they want to remain relevant, they'll have to do better than that. Otherwise, they risk being completely discredited before the trial even begins. Lively likely assumed that a bombshell article from the New York Times would be enough to destroy Baldoni's career. She expected an open and shut case. Yet here, we are, months later, and the case is still going strong. As for Megan Twohey, her involvement in this lawsuit has been anything but stellar. Instead of acting as an independent journalist, she came across as a publicist for hire. Yes, reporters are allowed to bring forward allegations, but when confronted with opposing evidence, wouldn't an ethical journalist want to dig deeper? Both. Sides claim they have the truth on their side. The Times argues that Baldoni is twisting the facts to appear as the victim, while Baldoni insists that the Times ran a hit piece to destroy him before he had a chance to defend himself. But only one side can be right, and based on the evidence so far, this fight is far from over. So buckle up, because this drama is just getting started.